Welcome to Hangeh Conversations. Here, we explore urban living and community building from its historic origins to the future with the help of our special guests. My name is Hassan, and together with childhood friends Zishan and Saf, we co founded Hangeh.
Today, we're very excited to have with us Pete Bombaci. Pete is a founder of the Genwell Project and is one of the leading voices on addressing social isolation and building human connection in Canadian communities. Pete has previously led the Movember Foundation and has done many other incredible things across his career, with the goal of always proving the power of human connection and what initiative can do. Pete's work and passion is also very inspiring in our journey of building Hangeh. Welcome, Pete. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's awesome to be here, guys. Really looking forward to this conversation.
So, Pete, jumping right into it, one question we really like to ask everyone we speak to here is tell us a little bit about your background and the kind of communities you grew up in.
Yeah, well, I'm born and bred in Toronto, so I guess I've grown up in urban centers my whole life. And, as it relates to the conversation today, I think I grew up in a time, I think I'm 56 years old, and anybody who grew up in my era was very fortunate. Because we had people on the street, we knew our neighbor, and the world was a much slower paced place. We had closed Sunday shopping, so we had a day that was almost dedicated to connecting with other people. And I think, like any other urban center, we've evolved so rapidly over the course of the last 30, 40 years. And, we now find ourselves living in the most disconnected worlds in history. And that's why this conversation today, what you're doing at Hangeh, what we're doing at the Genwell Project, is so important for us to talk and for other people to hear so that we can solve for some of the challenges that we're all facing out there.
That's fantastic. And another one is just tell us a little bit about the backstory of the Genwell Project. And I mean, we all know that it started a long time before social isolation became such a frontline topic that it is now. And like you've been leading the charge on it for so many years. So, how did that come about? And tell us a little bit about the story there.
Say it's I think it's a pretty cool story. It really, when I reflect back on my career, spending 25 years in the hospitality industry and then 5 years running Movember, I do realize that my passion has always been about people and things that connect us, whether that be coming together at a party or a community event or in a home, or whether that's, around mustaches and purpose, because all of those things are things that we all really benefit from. But the real thing that was the catalyst for actually launching a movement was a blackout that we experienced back in 2003 here in Toronto on the Eastern Seaboard. 50 million people went without power for 2 to 7 days. It depended on where you were. And what I saw was initially the reaction, and everybody that's listening to this can recognize the crisis that they've been through, whether it's mudslides in BC, earthquakes. We got floods in Calgary, we had floods in BC as well. We've got snowstorms, ice storms. The reality is we've all been through a crisis of one way, shape, or form. And that's beyond the personal crises that many people live each and every day. What I saw that day, and the beauty of something like the pandemic, is that we all have the shared experience of going through it together. But that day, with 50 million people, I saw initially the beauty of the human species during time of crisis. I saw people directing traffic and handing out ice cream and water and helping each other. People picking other people up on street corners in their cars and giving them rides. Which, as you guys know, in the modern world, that doesn't happen very much. And so it's amazing to see the beauty of the human species in times of crisis. But what really drove the Genwell Project was what happened that evening, is that there was so many people getting connected with family, friends, neighbors, classmates, colleagues. I know people who spent the entire evening in a bar in downtown Toronto because they came down from their 30th or 40th or 50th floor, in their office tower, and never left because they met people that they'd never known but they came together in that bar or that restaurant that night. I know people who spent time with their neighbors that they'd never spoken to before. I know people who had candlelight dinners with their family that they hadn't had dinners like that in months, if not years. And what I thought to myself was, wow, maybe we need to have more crises. I say that jokingly, but maybe we need to create some type of a catalyst. Maybe we need to give people an excuse and permission, because as an expert, Dr. Cram McKenzie from the Wellesley Institute said to me, what you're doing is you're saying it's okay to people. You're giving them permission to reach out and talk to their neighbor, or make the time to connect with other people, or remind them how important it is. And all those things combined were really, that day was the thing, with the learning and talking to experts, and even my time at Movember, seeing how important social connection was in the recovery of people from mental health, from cancer, from prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and recognizing that human connection is at the foundation of everything we do in life. And yet nobody had ever told us this. And I thought to myself, geez, it might be time that we maybe let people know just how important human connection is for their health and happiness.
That's a very inspirational story, Pete. I actually definitely resonate with a lot of what you said. Like, what it reminded me of actually was my days in university and dorm life, that provided that atmosphere and tools and resources to have support around. And it wasn't necessarily crisis, but they had some sort of mechanism for people to connect, whether it's in classes, intramural sports, events, other things happening. But there was some sort of a structure and framework that always ensured anybody coming to a dorm life or any new person coming in had some sort of support, and those human connections were made. Whether it is I need some help with my homework or I need to go kick the ball, I always had people that I know would be interested in doing those things. So I think that is what kind of led to our story as well. But then we started living professional lives in urban centers, and they realized, like, wait a minute, what happened to that structure, what happened to that support, what happened to those connections? So definitely a lot of alignment there. And actually, going a little bit more in depth with this, I would love, like, so our experience growing in South Asian communities, we had a very, very similar experience to you, where we were very fortunate to grow up in very strong communities where I believe every day, if not every other day, I was making trip to my neighbors to deliver food, salt, whatever it is, to help them out. Or if they need help with moving, I will be there helping them out. Knew every single neighbor's kids. We were friends. We were growing up together. There was a very strong sense of neighborhood and community, and we've never felt out of place. Like, we can be out ourselves and our parents are confident because everybody looks after each other's kids. So that's kind of the feeling we grew up in. Coming to North America, we kind of experienced the same in that dorm life that I just experienced. So that was a great, adjustment. And then we kind of moved into professional life, and that's where the disconnect happened. So I'm just wondering, in your experience, why do people living in cities find it so difficult to build sustainable communities? And what is it that we can do to change that?
Haas, I guess that's the $1 million question. So much in what you said there. So let's go back to campuses. This is our Heads Up campaign, which we've launched in campuses across Canada to make young people more heads up about their social health, and to create a catalyst. When you see Heads Up, if you understand what the program is all about and what the movement is all about, then you'll recognize that each of us has the opportunity, just by lifting our head up instead of looking at our phone and making eye contact with people, that alone can make all the difference in the world. So the research shows, as I'm sure you guys all know, that between the ages of 20 and 30 are actually when we create some of the most meaningful relationships in our lives, exactly for the reasons you just highlighted, which is, you don't have anywhere else to go. You go to class, you do some homework, you do homework maybe together with somebody else. We spend so much time together with the same people that most of our lifelong friendships, they say that building a lifelong friendship takes over 200 hours of time together. And that's where high school and university friends become so important, because it is one of the most important places to get 200 hours. Once we get to the age of 30, it becomes more difficult because we got relationships, we got moving, jobs, all those things. So, flipping off of the campus perspective, I think here's my belief is, it's not that people changed. It's that we need to look at the world and recognize that it's a completely different place. Now, we didn't help ourselves in this. We built bigger houses for smaller families. We built taller buildings with no places for people to gather. Although I will talk about that place thing a little bit more. We built taller backyard fences. We built in-home movie theaters, automatic garage doors. We built back decks instead of front porches. Everything that we've done to ourselves, which we weren't even conscious of doing, because we were kind of living unconsciously, just going through the motions of life. And it took a global pandemic for us to wake up and look around and realize, oh my gosh, I'm not as connected as I thought. I think a real important stat for us all to hear is that 63% of the people that you saw every day before the pandemic were not people that you had intended to see that day. They were what we call the casual collisions. That means if you don't leave your house, over half of the people that you saw every day that made you feel human, that made you feel valued, that made you feel that you weren't alone in this world, were wiped out of our lives. And so we're now waking up at the other end of a pandemic and we don't feel so good. And I still don't even think, to be honest with you, I don't even think most people are conscious as to why. I still think people think, oh, I didn't exercise enough, or I didn't eat well, or maybe I didn't get enough sleep or water. And I really think we need to, help people understand. They now say that social connection is more important than physical activity for our health and well-being, and as important as eating well. And I know you guys know Julianne Holt-Lundstat, the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So at the end of the day, why has it happened? It's because we built everything around us to create physical barriers, and then you throw on technology and you look at what it has done to a time distraction. Our research showed at the start of the pandemic, the average person had gone from 12 hours a day to 16 hours a day on technology at the start of the pandemic. Well, if you're supposed to sleep 7 to 8 hours and you're 16 hours on technology, there's nothing left. And so, I think we are, and we know, Mark Zuckerberg was asked, will he change his business model if he knew it was doing harm to the general population or to society? And he didn't answer the question. We've had the whistleblowers talk about what's going on behind the scenes at social media platforms. What we as a society need to recognize is the solution is not hoping that they're going to put more things onto their platforms to help us. The only people that need to help us are us. And this is why this human connection movement is so important, because it's not just me knowing about it, it's you knowing about it, and it's you caring about me and me caring about you. Whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, a neighbor, a colleague, a classmate, yes, I want to empower everybody so that you can stay connected by taking the steps that you need to. But I also want you to be conscious about the young person who's battling tech addiction, the older person who's battling loneliness because everybody that they know has passed away, or they don't have the mobility that they might have. I want to talk about the 90% of new moms who feel lonely and isolated, the over 50% of lawyers, doctors, entrepreneurs, small business people. Guys, it's all of us. And this is the power of human connection that we need to get into the hands of people each and every day.
Wow, Pete, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that, and completely aligned in terms of how you are mentioning that a lot of, if we just look at like the past few decades, and just the role urbanization has also played. We have built these cities which are like monuments, and everyone is like looking at it as like as an experience. You can go and live like the best life, but once you are there, as you alluded to as well, we build these cities subconsciously, where we have built massive infrastructures but without any thought towards social or real human connection. We have four walls, we sit in it, but there's no way to even know who's next door. There's no space for people to even like gather, or like the community places are missing. So the way we're also seeing is definitely the way our city infrastructure is built, like with urban planning and even like building architectures, there is like a huge flaw, and some of that is really difficult to even reverse. You might even need like a century, if not more. And on the flip side, as you're also mentioning, like social media has also played a massive role in really disconnecting the people by using the social connection analogy. And that's kind of where we're also seeing that there's a lot of bad in it as well, but there are definitely some opportunities which can be leveraged. If you're really using it in close proximity, really leveraging it as a tool to really connect people rather than keep them engaged on a digital interface. So would love to hear your thoughts on, how do you see technology or social media or any of these tools? Are there opportunities in here which can allow us to really go back to the real human connection, or is it only kind of going downwards from here on?
No, no. Hey, we will. I will never give up hope, Z. We can't give up hope. We need to believe that we can, not correct, but we can guide people in a healthier direction. And so, as you probably know, Genwell Project is not anti-technology. We're pro-human connection, and that's because we know that technology is here to stay. And your app, to me, is part of the solution. If you look back, early on in the days of technology, usually people refer to the smartphone being the tipping point for whether technology was always good or maybe there was some dark sides to it. All the books only spoke about the positive. It was going to save time. I have a deaf sister, so I had an opportunity to connect with my deaf sister by using the phone and FaceTiming. So there were some beautiful things that happened, but nobody could even have imagined Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and all the other platforms that are out there. And so we just need to be conscious. We need to recognize what is adding value to our lives. If it is facilitating an opportunity for me to text you and say, hey, do you want to go have a cup of coffee? That's a beautiful way to use technology. Look at what we're doing right now. If in the old days we might have had a phone call, or I think of always my old friends who I always think, geez, let's get connected. I hope when I come out to Vancouver next, I'll get a chance. We'll go for a beer. And that drags on for 5 years and then 10 years. And then it's so long that you don't even feel like you can reach out to the person because, you've been so disconnected. So what a beautiful use of technology to connect people, to have conversations and engage. So technology is a beautiful thing when it's used properly. And that's what we're all trying to do, is we're trying to say, look, if I can tell you that you're spending 16 hours a day and that human connection is something you don't have time for, maybe tomorrow you could save 5 minutes. Maybe I could get you to go and call a friend and have a coffee for 30. I'm not asking you to get rid of TikTok or Instagram or whatever the platform is that you love. What I'm asking you to do is say, hey, prioritize what's important for your health and well being and for the betterment of society as a whole.
Well, Pete, I really think the timing of our conversation is pretty special because we just celebrated the Genwell weekend last weekend, and I personally think it's such an inspiring message, and it really puts people out of the lull, as you had mentioned. There's that sub unconscious, activity that anyone is can be mindful of, but people decide not to, or somehow, we just don't have enough time for it. Like that's an excuse when you live in a busy city. Tell us more about the Genwell weekend, how it came about, how was the experience this year, and like we've been seeing such a special turnout in terms of like pictures and social media and things, and yeah, we're super proud to support it in any way we can. But yeah, how was your experience this year, and how do you see it going forward? You
Yes,
on
Avi,
board?
honestly, it was amazing. We had 97 people register their plans to get connected, and that may seem small in the big context of Canada with 38 million people, but we still are a small not for profit. We don't have any money to really put behind marketing. We still are looking for corporate partners because I believe that this message, whether it's a bank or an insurance company, a telco who wants to recognize the importance of finding the balance with technology. Everybody has an opportunity to play a role. So we had some really great numbers. We had nearly 2,000 people invited to different events across the country to get connected. What I love about it is we had some as large as people inviting, a couple hundred of their neighbors to come out to a garage sale. But we also had 11 people book coffee or a chat with one other person. And that's the real insight to what we're trying to do as the Genwell Project. I don't care what you do. You know, some people may have a barbecue, some may go for a walk, some might have a street long potluck. I had a live music, a live performer on my parking pad, invited all my neighbors to get connected. And this is now probably the fifth time that I've done this event. And I met new neighbors that I hadn't met who have lived here for 20 years. And I'm a pretty social guy. I have a little kid. We're outside playing ball hockey. And so it's amazing to me that every time we do this, I get to meet new people. But if I didn't have the Genwell weekend as my excuse, I don't think I would do it either. So to me, this is like the blackout. Sometimes we just, and say if you said it, you know, sometimes we just need the excuse. We need the catalyst to make it happen. And I also, you know, I fear rejection just like many people do. You know, I don't want to send out an invite and have people go, who's the crazy guy next door who's trying to get everybody together? You know, this way I have an excuse. I can point people to the website. I can say, actually, I'm doing it to support this thing. So why don't you come out? Because it's good for you and it's good for me. And so we had some great numbers. We had some great activities. We had more people like you guys sharing our information this year. And we had the city of or the town of Collingwood in Ontario proclaimed Genwell Weekend, you know, for their community, to encourage all the members of their community to get connected with family, friends, neighbors, colleagues, and classmates. We've had a couple experts comment on the social posts saying that this is the future. We need every community in this country to jump on board to this movement, because everybody, you know, say if you said it, we all have a long list of people we know we want to see them. We are, you know, social animals. We need human connection. But so many of us, I don't know if you saw the research at Christmas time, we did a piece with Coca-Cola, and it showed that 10 million Canadians are lonelier than they've ever felt before. That's almost a third of us, you know. And we know that the research from before that we did with the Canadian Social Connection Survey shows it's almost 50% or more in every demographic across, you know, the Canadian population that's feeling lonely and isolated at times or often. So the reality is, it's all of us. I've said that earlier by sector, but now I'm saying it by demographics.
Mhm.
You know, it's all of us. And so we all are part of the solution, and we all benefit from understanding how important human connection is.
That's a great idea, Pete. I mean, we also got together over the Genwell weekend, you know,
Nice.
just to like talk about what else we can do. Had a few friends as well, and you know, it is the need of the time, as you mentioned. It is like the future where things are gonna go, and you know, we'll be looking forward to seeing it as like a national day. You know, where people can really get together and really celebrate the human connection, which has gone so far away because of a lot of the, you know, things which are happening around in our society. So just a question around that is, you know, when we talk about social isolation or even like loneliness, a lot of the research and stats really show that this is a crisis, you know, as we've been calling it, a silent crisis as well. It's coming, no one really knows, but it's there. Why is that we haven't really seen any mainstream, you know, push towards the human connection or social isolation, even loneliness becoming like a main topic? It's still like, you know, you see some content here and there about it, people talk about it, but it's not like a pandemic, it's not like COVID, it's not like what's happening in tech. So just wondering what your thoughts are on it. Do we really need like a massive, like a bad incident or event to happen? As you were saying, you know, you jokingly for fun say that we may need a crisis for people to realize what's happening.
Well, yeah. So the answer is, I think there's one reason that it isn't on everybody's agenda. However, as you guys know, there's now a loneliness minister in the UK. There's now a loneliness minister in Japan. New York just called out loneliness as a health crisis that New Yorkers are facing. And so I've had the opportunity, I sit on the global initiative for loneliness and connection with all the other major loneliness campaigns around the world: US, UK, Australia, um, um, Japan's there, some European countries. And I sit there on behalf of Canada. And what I can tell you is that, you know, the good, but the bad news is that nobody's really taken this issue seriously yet. But they are going to. And Vivek Murthy, who's the Surgeon General in the United States, said, this is the next major health crisis that we're about to face. And he also said that this may be the crisis. The pandemic may be the crisis that actually awakes us all to it. But I think the real reason why this hasn't hit anybody's radar yet is that you don't die of loneliness. You know, when you're lonely, disconnected, socially isolated, it increases your likelihood of heart disease by 32%, heart attack by 34. It increases your likelihood of early onset dementia. It doubles your risk of diabetes after the age of 50. Obviously, anxiety and depression skyrockets, suicide goes up, obesity. So there are so many repercussions that come from it, but you don't die from loneliness. So it's not in the headline that you died of loneliness, it's you died of a heart attack. And it's not in the records that you died of loneliness, it's you died of complications from dementia or diabetes. And we know diabetes and all these illnesses are skyrocketing. But what do we do as a society? We treat the symptom. We wait till you have diabetes and then we give you drugs to solve the diabetes. You have a heart attack, we give you the drugs to thin your blood and to help you get through the crisis. And I just think that really the definition of insanity is waiting until people are sick before we try to help them. And so to me, what we need to do is raise the consciousness. And that's why, what you guys are doing and what we're doing is so critically important for us to build on each other's work, because that's the fastest way for us to get it at the population level awareness, so that people start taking human connection more seriously as a key component of their health and well-being. We know about physical activity. We've had a program, Participation, since 1971. We've known about eating well since 1942 is when the Canadian Food Guide came. We've been educated on water and sleep. Even when we talk about mental health over the last 10, 12 years, unfortunately, a lot of the things that we encourage people to do, we do by ourselves. Mindfulness, meditation, breathing techniques, gratitude, journaling, all those things are powerful. They're really important, but they don't solve for our social health. And what we need to do is rebuild a connected Canada that allows everybody to feel that sense of connection and belonging, because that sense of connection and belonging now is more important than staying physically active. And yet none of us have ever been educated on it. And we don't even think about it when we're thinking why we may not feel so well today.
Yeah, so Pete, staying on the topic of the importance of spreading this messaging and like bringing the power of proximity to it, and like talking about now urban center. In your experience, how is this message being received in Canada by the property operators and developers? And are they aligned in the future? Do you see hope that we will be celebrating Genwell Weekend nationwide as a whole, as a nation together, and hopefully globally as well?
Oh, here's what I'm going to say to you. The honest response is I always feel like we're finding the needles in the haystacks. You know, 5 years ago when I started this campaign, Haas, nobody understood what I was talking about. 3 years ago, 1 in 100 knew what I was talking about. 1 year into the pandemic, 3 in 10 knew what I was talking about. And now, as we come out the other side of the global pandemic, and you can see it in all the articles about whether you're talking about workplace or you're talking about schools, or you're talking about communities, there is no question we need to help people get reconnected. So, I've reached out to some developers, no interest. And I know one of the developers made a large contribution to what they said to battle loneliness and isolation, but they donated it to food banks and food shelters and to people, to homeless shelters. And that's wonderful. And that's really important. We need to help people that are in crisis. But let's take a thin wedge. Let's take a little bit of that money and say, hey, what if I could have prevented 10% of those people who ended up at the food bank, or who ended up homeless, who ended up disconnected from their family for whatever reason, and their friends? If we took 10% of we spend $320 billion a year on Canadian healthcare. And how much do you think we spend on prevention? Not a lot. And so not only are we not spending it on prevention, we're not spending it on a message that we've never even heard before. So we have a long way to go. And I think there's two opportunities. Government certainly needs to be here. They've been set the precedence, whether it's participation of the food guide, that they've always played a role. But I think, developers, I think, whether it's all corporations, because you can talk about it from the internal element of, you have 1,000 employees. You have, in my belief, you have a responsibility to educate them on what we're talking about today. So every business has an opportunity and a role to play in educating their employees. But whether you're a commercial developer or you're a residential developer, the opportunity to support the people that are in your building, that are, whether you're going to work there or you're sleeping there, is off the charts opportunity to say to people, I actually don't want to just sell you a condo. I don't want to rent you an apartment. I don't just want to lease you some commercial property. I want to help you live a healthy and happy life. And I think this is something that every developer has an opportunity to use to service the people that they sell or lease their properties to.
Yeah, and Pete, borrowing from that thought, like in our work, we are a lot closer to the resident experience that exists in apartment buildings or where people live in very, very dense proximity with each other. And I think a lot has changed now. Much like you, we are perpetual optimists too. There is a lot good that there is to look forward. I'm sure there's gaps that we see as well. There is frustrations, obviously, when people don't really resonate with something which is obvious, because economics of a market unfortunately dictate a lot of behavior in the short term, and that comes at the cost of the long term usually, and that's how a lot of these problems sort of compound themselves. But one of the reasons why we were big fans of your work is all the research that Genwell Project has put out through the years, and especially around what millennials and Gen Z are going through. And what we feel here is, over the next 5 years, that creates the largest cohort of people who would be living in cities, and they would be the ones who would be living in close proximity to each other. And I think uh, overall, millennials and Gen Z, they get a sort of a bad rap in terms of attitudes and behaviors which are attached to them, in terms of how they like to be disconnected, and they're so individual that they find it hard to relate with each other. But our experience, being in that cohort ourselves, and what we observe and what the research has also shown, the this segment is way more sensitive about their mental health. They are the ones who actually resonate a lot with the message that you are putting forward based on your work with campuses and universities. And as this generation sort of moves forward, that creates a new type of a resident. And our hope personally is that's where the demand is. And slowly that behavior would shift, and it would demand changes from the industry. Like, for example, one of the mind boggling statistics that came out over the last 2 years is how people's uh, living preferences have evolved to a point that there's almost 90% of people who live in apartments. They want amenities and social connections as like their top priority of what their quality of life
Wow.
is. And unfortunately, up until now, that's being ignored by what the market is doing. But there is a way forward. There's a great hope there. My question to you is around like all the good information and the research work the Genwell Project is doing. Are there any plans that you have on specifically focusing on, say, millennials and Gen Z, and how their attitudes would dictate what the world looks like in the future? I think that's such an interesting research space, and your organization is the best capable to tackle that.
Off the top of my head, Safe, I would say I don't think there's anything that we're specifically looking at, but we look across all demographics every time we do a piece of research. So for the second time this June, we'll be coming back with the Canadian Social Connection Survey, and we'll be going through a series of questions with Canadians. Last year, we had 2,500 people fill out a lengthy, like a 30-minute survey about their social well-being and social connections. And so we've been fortunate to partner with another organization to get some funding so we can get more people's input. We've got some people, I think it's 1,200 people agreed to be re-surveyed again this year. And that's where we start to really get powerful information, because we get the longitudinal, what changed over the second year of the pandemic, how is that impacting you. But as far as Gen Zs and millennials, to me, we all need human connection. There may come a time, and as a movement that's trying to raise the collective consciousness, to me, it's working with people like you guys. And you guys understand your segment. You understand where you're working and where your app is most valuable. And this is where I think it's the combination of us educating the broader population and you seeing strategic areas where we can be more beneficial and coming together, whether it's us and coming doing this podcast or going and doing a workshop or creating events in some of the buildings that you're in, or whether it's having you on one of our podcasts to make sure that we're spreading the message so that if we talk about it in the lens of a senior, a millennial, or a Gen Z may not think this is about them. But we need to find different ways to present this information so that everybody realizes, oh my God, you're talking about me. I thought you were just talking about them, because we always think it's just them. And now it's like, no, no, no. As we come out of this global pandemic, we need each other more than ever. And I mean it for people that are struggling, but I also mean it for everybody who's doing great. Whether it's because by staying socially connected, they stay happy and healthy, or B, they have an opportunity to look around them, whether it's their own family, their neighbor, their friends, their colleagues, a classmate, and say, hey, I haven't seen those guys in a while. I should reach out to them and see how they're doing. And this is about just raising that collective consciousness. So, Save, our goal is to make sure that we're educating all Canadians about the importance of human connection. But, again, the reason I love this conversation, and you guys are way too humble. We haven't talked about your app yet and what it's doing, because I believe your app, and I really believe this. Oftentimes I hear people talk about infrastructure, that we don't have enough parks or we don't have enough places to connect. And I understand that to an extent. But I think the biggest barrier is the emotional disconnections that we have from each other. It's that we don't feel like the other person wants to talk to us. The science shows, over 90% of the time when you talk to a stranger, both people are happy that it happened. Yep. But yet, what have we been telling people for 50 years? Don't talk to strangers. Well, and somebody in a large apartment building who hasn't spoken to anybody on their floor or any other floor, for months or years, they're still a stranger. Yeah. But what it takes is just one catalyst. It takes, the Hangeh app to, do something. What are we doing? How are we getting people to get connected? Because if we can catalyze people around moments, occasions, Genwell weekend, the Super Bowl, there's all these occasions throughout the year. We just need to first educate them on why is human connection so important, and then give them the opportunities to make it happen. And I think that's what you guys have. And that's why I think your app is so important as we move forward, whether it's in a high dense population of condo or an apartment building, but I think it can actually work in a lot of other places as well.
Definitely, Pete. So I mean, for us, like it's using technology and power of proximity to create and enable those real world connections, and that's really what we are after with our app as well. And like I really resonate with like the simple things that we can all individually do in our lives to kickstart those interactions and those behaviors. And it's as small as those elevator conversations, as you like, instead of head down elevator time, maybe put your head up just like that and have a conversation. Start exactly. Start that conversation. And I think those are the little things that makes the most different. And I mean, I learned this in university is like asking goes a long way. Most of the people are just scared of asking. And, I have gotten away with so much help in my life by just simply asking for help. And I think if we can start reminding people that people are actually willing and motivated to help you, all you have to do is ask, that goes a long way. And I think we're just somehow missing that, and we feel like we are too busy to not make that happen and not make those connections. But it's just day to day things that we're doing, taking the elevator, going to the garage, going to the garbage, anything that we are doing, there's opportunities for us to kickstart those interaction, and I think we are missing out on that. And that's where I think to your point, education and awareness goes a long way. It's just opening up people's mind, like, hey, that neighbor is not thinking negatively, or if you're not judging you, he actually wants to connect with you. But in our head, we create these stories and like kind of stop ourselves from making those connections. So I'm very curious about this next question, and I'm going to keep it at the macro level. But what does an ideal community look like to you?
Hmm. That's interesting. Having not thought about this, I think about it on the individual connections. To me, I think about it from an individual level and say, a community where each individual feels a sense of connection and belonging to other people. But when I think of community, I also don't just think of the geography. And from a human connection movement, I think about it more broadly and saying people's community is far greater than the people that they live or work beside. It's friends, it's family, it's organizations that they might be part of. And that's our message, is to try and help people build a whole collective of their community, versus just within the physical geography. But I know that that's the focus of the conversation today. So from a geography standpoint, I think it really does come back to living in a geographical area where you feel like you belong, where you have a sense of connection. And frankly, that if you did have some type of a challenge or crisis, that you felt that there was people around that you could count on to help you, because it is those supportive networks that make us feel confident, that allow us to be resilient, and maybe allow us to take on, build the confidence and allow us to take on some challenges that maybe we wouldn't if we didn't have those supportive networks.
That's awesome, Pete. And probably one of the last questions we like to ask in our conversations is, any books or movies that inspired you or you find impactful and you would like to share it? That'd be good.
Well, I think, for anybody in this space, obviously Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, which is, in the 90s, that's really the quintessential understanding of why and how we've ended up in the place we have. Dr. Vivek Murthy just wrote his book last year called Together, which is another amazing, more current and relevant book about just how important. And he is, again, for the second time, the Surgeon General in the U.S., and is a passionate champion about building greater human connection. I think he has an initiative coming out in the next couple of months. He's part of the global initiative on loneliness and connection that I have the blessing of sitting on. So I've never met him yet, but I get to have a little insight to the work that he's doing, which is really powerful. As far as movies, there's a great movie. We just showed it the other day, and people can follow us at genwellproject.org. I think you guys have seen it, right? The Great Disconnect.
We interviewed
Yeah.
Tamer for here as well. Yeah, he's a friend.
So Tamer, he's a beautiful, beautiful human being, and I know there's a few different loneliness videos out there, documentaries out there. One out of Harvard, but I think Tamer's movie is absolutely stellar. I've shared it with our scientific advisory panel now, and I think there's a lot of interest in showing that movie more often, because it is a different format from what we do normally at Genwell, with short video clips and static imagery and quotes and research and articles, versus everybody loves a film. So I encourage everybody, go check out the Great Disconnect, and follow us at Genwell, so that we can line you up for a viewing, because it's not available on any of the, as you guys know, on any of the normal streaming services. So find a way to see it, and make it part of your next movie viewing.
Well, this was amazing, Pete, and your energy, your passion, like maybe you don't realize it enough, but it inspires a lot of people. It has definitely inspired us in what we do, and it keeps doing that every single day. And I hope our work, makes you proud, and we'll always look up to you for all the good work that you have done for such a long time. And more power to you. It's been our honor and a pleasure.
Guys, it's an absolute pleasure to connect with you. And I said it before we came on air. I really do believe passionately in Hangeh and the work that you guys are doing. And I do believe that it will solve a lot of the struggles that people feel in making those initial connections. And Haas, I think it was you when you were talking about those little things. You know, it can't be the one and done anymore. We've tried this in the past where we come in and if you think of a high density living space, we do the summer barbecue and we do the Christmas party. That's not enough. We need to have the everyday little interactions and the encouragement of people to say it's okay. People need human connection. You do, and so does that other person in the elevator. And if we can help educate people on those simple, and give them the research, give them the stories, and if we can help them understand it, I think we truly can make the world a happier and healthier place, one face-to-face conversation at a time. And I think it's, working with you guys at Hangeh and what we're doing at Genwell, I think we really can change the world, just by raising the consciousness and making people a little more intentional about making it happen in their lives. So thanks very much for the time. It's been a great conversation. And I know that this will be the first of many chats and things that we do together to make the world a happier and healthier place.
Thank you so much, Pete.